So we come to the third talk of this morning. Dr. Bjorn Stigson, who is the chairman of his own consulting company and since April 2010, a visiting professor at the School of Business, Economics and Law at the University of Gothenburg, and honorary professor on sustainable development at EBS Business School, Wiesbaden. Bjorn Stigson also serves as senior advisor to the head of International Institute for Applied System Analysis, Vienna, and to the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences, Sweden. So Dr. Stigson, please.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, conference delegates and distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation to be here with you this afternoon. I have been asked to give a broad perspective from an international view on sustainability and the role of thorium. When I look at the future world, I see a world which is a real growth story. And this is driven by a few strong trends. The first is population growth. Over the next decades, up to 2050, we are going to add about a third more people on this planet, and they are going to be born and raised in the emerging economies. So by 2050, we have 85% of the world's population in what we today call emerging economies. 15% is the old world. It is Europe, North America, Japan, and Australia. And this buildup of population in the emerging economies and the growing middle class is also driving faster economic growth in the emerging economies. And already in 10 years' time, 2025, we expect that about 60% of the world's GDP is in the emerging economies. There is another important trend, and that is increased urbanization. We are about 3 billion people that live in cities today. We expect that by 2050, in 40 years, we will be 6 billion people living in cities. And these new cities will be built in Asia and in Africa. And if we build them with the type of urban infrastructure that we have today, we won't have a sustainable world in 2050. It's one very, very important issue for the future. What also happens is that at the same time as we have this growth in population, we've got an aging population. And in some countries, this means actually that the population is going down. Germany and Japan are the typical examples. What we see also is that the focus in the emerging economies is understandably to improve quality of life, reduce poverty, and that requires economic growth, that requires use of more resources. And we heard from the previous speaker about global energy demand. Basically, the energy demand in the OECD countries is going to stand still for the next 40 years, and all growth in energy demand is coming in the emerging economies. So when I look at this world with these simple trends, I see a world which is inevitably resource constrained and it's carbon constrained. And inevitably, it's a world which will have to go through a transition to sustainability. The economy will change, society will change, the pressure on the environment will grow, and we are trying to find a way on how to govern this transformation. And we are struggling with that in different ways, both nationally and globally, to find a way to manage this. Since a few years, there is something what I've called a green race going on, a green competition. Which countries and companies are going to be the leading suppliers of the resource-efficient, low-polluting product systems, solutions that the world inevitably, the world markets will be asking for. And if you want to be a leading exporter or a global company, you have to be able to provide those type of solutions. If you cannot, you won't be an exporter. And if you want to be such a leading country, you have to transform your domestic market. So you build up a demand in your home country, that is then the source of competence and scale as a platform for exports. And if we look at some countries, the countries that have taken the lead in the green race is China. They are investing far more than anybody else in transforming their economy. And this transformation is a major part of the present and the next 5-year plan in China. I have been an advisor to the Chinese leadership, to the State Council, for 16 years on these type of issues. So I'm pretty familiar with what they are thinking. If we look at, as an example in investments, renewable energy, China is by far #1. Actually, the investments in renewable energy in China is bigger than the sum of the next 10 countries, big countries also, and their investments in renewable energy. And there is a very strong awareness and determination in the Chinese leadership to change the way the Chinese society and economy works. And last year, the Prime Minister Li Keqiang said, "We are going to declare war against our inefficient and unsustainable model of growth and way of life." And they are also seeking international cooperation. And it might be interesting to note that there is a big agreement, a bilateral agreement between China and Germany on innovation that was signed last autumn. Japan, the neighbor to China, is the world's most energy efficient economy, has a good technology platform for green solutions, good global companies, and is pushing innovation. But what has also happened with the shutdown of nuclear is that Japan has become the world's biggest importer of gas. 30% of global imports is going to Japan. And even for an economy like the Japanese economy, it's becoming too costly. So therefore, they consider reopening nuclear. Then we've got the US, the world's most innovative economy, but they have a political deadlock in Washington, as we know, and you cannot get innovations to really penetrate the economy if you don't have the support of the right type of political framework, and that is not happening in the US. So they are falling behind China in the green race. A lot is happening, decentralized in states and cities in the US. And what is interesting to note right now is also that the IT people in Silicon Valley are starting now to make major investments into renewable energy and also into new, actually nuclear technologies. And then we've got the big thing on the energy side in the US, the shale gas revolution. And this has also meant that the use of coal is going down in the US. So US is going to meet its requirements for reducing CO2 emissions because of that. And actually they are exporting the cheap coal to Europe that is burning more gas, which is a rather strange situation. We have the EU. The EU has been the world leader in green technology exports historically. About 30% global market share, and half of that is Germany. But in my view, the transformation of the internal market in the EU is going too slow, and the EU is going to lose global market share. There are two big things going on the energy side in Europe. One is the dependence on energy imports from Russia and how that's being handled in the present situation. And then it's the transformation of the German energy system, which has created a lot of different issues that I don't have time to go into right now. Germany is looking at sustainability as a core element of their industrial strategy and a strategy for the country going forward. And they've got major investment programs in research. They have a 5-year research program now, which has a dedicated budget for sustainability research of 1 billion euros per year into 4 areas: resource efficiency, climate and energy, quality of life, and education. I mentioned that they have an agreement with China. And the Chinese Prime Minister said when they signed this agreement last year, he said, Germany has the technology, we have the markets. It's a great partnership going forward. And you should be aware of the closer ties here between the two big exporters. Germany and China are the two big exporters, and they are joining forces on a number of fronts. India, I'm a foreigner, but some observations on your situation connected to energy. Clearly, you need major investments, as we've heard, both to provide electricity to people that lack it, but also to improve your reliability of supply. You need a major increase in energy efficiency, and I'll come back to what that looks like on the global level. And with China in a program to reduce their emissions, it seems to me that you are probably on track to become the world's biggest emitter of CO2 globally. And that will create a lot of political pressure on India going forward. So how do you actually turn to a low-carbon economy with renewables and fossil, renewables and nuclear and less fossil? These are, in my experience, energy systems on the scale of a country like India are very, very rigid systems. It takes a long time to change. Let me say a little bit more about business and sustainability, because I'm a businessman. I've been more than 40 years in business, and for 18 years I was the president of something called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is a coalition of 200 of the world's biggest companies and their chief executives, dedicated to deal with the sustainability issues for global business. These 200 companies have a market cap, a value on the stock exchanges of 8,000 billion US dollars. And the organization has also national organizations in a regional network in 60 countries. One in China, one in India, called WBCSD India. In 2008, I found that we needed from global business to develop our thinking about what does this world really look like going forward. A world that is going to be resource constrained, pollution constrained. And if we are 9 billion people or around that number, how will 9 billion people live well within the limits of the planet? And if we are going to share resources more equitably than we have been doing up to now, what does that look like? And I got about 30 of our member companies engaged for 2 years, and they developed a pathway to 2050. I don't expect you to be able to read this. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the principle. And what they did was they developed up society and the economy in 9 different elements, from soft issues like people's values to hard issues like materials, mobility, buildings, and energy. And they looked at what would a sustainable world look like by 2050 in these different elements. And if we are here today, what would we have to change? What transformations would we have to go through to be able to come to this sustainable world? They concluded that from a technical perspective, this is probably, we can do this from global business. But they said, what is the real big issue? Is there a political will to really go through the transformations that will be very disruptive in society? And transformations that will create not just winners. The transformation to sustainability will create winners and losers. And is the political will, the capacity of the political system capable of driving that type of change? And that was a very substantial discussion that we had and that we have in global business. And if we look at the climate negotiations, we can see that clearly there are difficulties for the global society to come to grips with these type of issues. What we also saw was that if you want sustainability, you have to understand systems issues. Energy is connected to water, is connected to climate, is connected to food, is connected to land use, as examples. The understanding of system solutions in society is very limited. And I'm an advisor to the head of IASA in Vienna, which is the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. There is a huge need to better understand how different things interact if we are going to solve this. And we act very much in silos, both in the both in the political world, in academia, and we are very poor at really understanding the cross-sectoral issues. What the companies also were saying as they were doing this was they said, this is actually the biggest business opportunity that we've ever seen in the history of modern industry. Those companies that get it and understand and invest will see enormous investment opportunities. And those companies that don't understand and don't invest, they won't be around. We said basically, don't worry about them. They won't be around in the future. Let me say a little bit more about energy and climate. When I'm looking at the energy and climate globally, I see a very fast-changing energy landscape. I see definitely more distributed electricity generation. I see that electrification of transportation probably will go much quicker than what people think. I see solutions being developed for electricity storage, which will be then very important for distributed electricity. I see the issue of smart grids, and there, interestingly, the new competitors that are coming in are the IT companies. When I ask traditional energy equipment suppliers, who do you see as your competitors going forward? They say IBM, Cisco, Google, Apple. These are the ones that they see as their competitors in a new smart electricity system. This has also meant very changing roles for electricity utilities. As there are more renewables, they lose their customer base, and the traditional business model that they've had with centralized big power stations is not working. This has happened very much in Germany, it's happened in Europe. And actually in 5 years, from 2008 to 2013, the 20 biggest utilities in Europe lost 500 billion euros in market value. They lost a half of their value at the stock exchanges. We lost more money on the value of the electricity utilities in Europe than we lost in the banks in the financial crisis. It's enormous stranded assets and loss of value. We have the question of the baseload electricity, where should it come from? And we have the question of shale gas. And when we look at the future energy mix, then it is clear that we need clean, safe, scalable energy. And I'm sure nuclear will have an important role, in thorium, and so will renewables. When we look at the energy system, we see that the oil industry probably is facing similar situations as the electricity utilities. Their traditional business models, very linear business models, are coming under pressure. Now, the power sector, apart from these issues of stranded assets, have taken many actions. And the power sector today should be more broadly defined than the traditional electricity utilities. When we look at the demand for electricity, and we heard that from the earlier speaker, it will go up to, over the next 25 years, it will go up with about 40%. And all of that is in the emerging economies. And there is no increase in the OECD countries. And what we see also is that the share of new net added capacity globally in electricity generation is projected by the IEA to be about 50%. And we see also another impact of what is happening, and that is the consequence of what is happening in the energy system for exports of energy-intensive goods. That's things like steel, aluminum, chemicals, paper, and so on. And the energy prices in Europe and in Japan are higher, substantially higher than in the US with the shale gas. And the IEA is projecting that over the next 25 years, then Europe and Japan will lose 1/3 of their market share in energy export of energy-intensive goods, partly to the US, but also to the emerging economies. What the IEA has also been pushing is the importance of energy efficiency. This statistics is a few years old, but it's still valid. And when they looked in IEA, where will emission reductions come from? What will energy efficiency mean? They concluded that about 60% of the emission reductions would have to come from energy efficiency. And it's not energy efficiency in the production of energy. It's energy efficiency in the consumption phase. How do we consume energy in society? Both as individuals in urban infrastructures, in transportation and so on, and what's happening in industry. So energy efficiency will play a very, very important role going forward. And we can see how that is now being pushed by global business in many ways. If we look at the climate agenda, what will affect the climate agenda going forward? I don't think it will be that much affected by a meeting in Paris in December, to be quite honest. I think the competition, that the future markets will ask for energy efficient products, low polluting products. I think energy efficiency will play a role, as I say, in consumption. I think the price of carbon will drive change in the mix. But then it's a lot of technology innovations. Electrification of transport, storage, new nuclear that you've been discussing, and the question of CO2 management. I don't believe in carbon capture and storage, CCS. It's, in my view, far too expensive and far too complicated. I don't think that will save the coal industry. But there is research going on about trying to break the CO2 molecule. If we could turn CO2 from being a pollutant to being a raw material, that would mean a completely shift of the whole idea of what climate change is about. We are not there. It's a process, but there are some promising research going on in many parts of the world. Now, if I look at how do we handle this situation in the globe, I see a need for partnerships and collaboration. I don't think any part of society can solve this on their own. I don't think governments can do it on their own. Markets are too slow to drive transformational change. Markets are very good at driving things in very well-defined areas, but markets are not good to drive the type of transformational change that we talk about when it comes to sustainability. So we need new partnerships, and we need different players to deliver on their respective roles. We need partnerships between governments and business in a stronger way, where governments deliver the framework within which business can operate, and business deliver innovations and implementation, that is business role. I don't think, in most parts of the world, that governments have the trust of the public, and business, big business, does not have the trust of the public. So if we are going to get political acceptance for the type of transformations that we need to go through, we must have a close cooperation with civil society that can say, well, this is probably as good as it gets. I mean, we understand that everything cannot be perfect. But if we are trying, from big governments and big business, to push these type of transformations onto the public, then we will not succeed. And then we need also partnerships with academia, research, with science, but also we need to start educating the next generation of leaders about sustainability. If you want to have an education on sustainable development in a technical university or in a business school anywhere in the world, you have to look long and hard. We are not educating the people that are going to lead us and drive change in the future into these issues. We educate them about what has worked and not worked in the past. The academic education system is very backward-looking, and that's one reason that I'm visiting professor at 2 schools, because I got so frustrated. I said, well, if I'm that critical, I better get onto the ground and see what it actually looks like. Can something be done? And we need really to reform the education system if we want leaders that are going to be able to drive these changes. What you also need, I think, if you want to succeed with thorium, is you need a platform which is not just made up of the industry that is delivering the thorium or running the thorium energy. We created the World Business Council for Sustainable Development to have a neutral platform which was not the individual company, but a platform of like-minded actors that wanted to drive change in a certain direction. And I think you have the nucleus for such an organization in this International Thorium Energy Organization, that if that organization can have a constituency that is broad enough from different interests, then that can create a level of confidence in the people that you are trying to address. And you need those type of facilitators when you are trying to drive change, because otherwise it is very difficult to get acceptance. And I say that having been running one such organization globally for 18 years, representing global business. And we managed to create trust for what we were trying to do. So I wish you great success. What you're trying to do in India with thorium energy is very important, as you have been saying, the earlier speakers. And I support that. I think it is important. But there are many other things on this agenda. Energy efficiency, reliability of supply, your grid is not good enough, and so on, that you need to address. Thorium can play a role, but thorium won't get you there alone. You need systems analysis. What Germany did not have when they took the decision to change the energy system, they had not their homework in the systems analysis. And therefore, they ended up with many unintended consequences. And I recommend you to think long and hard about what should the Indian energy system look like. Do your systems analysis, and then decide on where are the points where you really need to drive change. Thorium will certainly have a role, but you need to understand the system. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stigson. We have time for maybe just one question, if any. Yes, please.
I see that you seem to be pointing the finger at India and indirectly at China for becoming the biggest integral polluters of the world. And I think it's totally unfair. As one of the prestigious speakers mentioned earlier, the relevant measure is the per capita pollution. I mean, why is it that an American citizen would be allowed to pollute 4 or 5 times more than an Indian citizen? And I wish this would be the measure that is used in the discussion in Paris at the end of the year, because this is the real discussion. And you talked about Germany, which is the greenest country in the world, where the German citizens are the biggest polluter in Europe. That's a result of their so-called green strategy. So I wish that, you know, these things be taken into account. And the second comment I would like to make is that the Western world developed the most advanced nuclear technologies and is not raising one finger to help countries like India and China develop new technologies in nuclear energy. And as Dr. Kakotkar said, it's a duty of everyone to make nuclear energy sustainable, and that's a global problem that requires global approach and cooperation.
I do not disagree that you can utilize energy intensity as one target. The problem is that the climate negotiations between countries is not going to focus on that. And even it doesn't matter to me, in my view, if India says we are only going to measure that. The international climate negotiations are going to focus on absolute emissions. I have been representing global business in these negotiations for 20 years or more. And it is not the most efficient way of doing things that they are doing. And so I'm not saying that energy intensity is a bad measure. But what I am saying is that reality is How are the international society going to talk about this? They are going to talk about absolute emission reductions, unfortunately.
If there are no other questions, let us thank the speaker.
Thank you.